Hello again, everyone. To continue on here with our session. This one is all about ads. Let me just double check to make sure. Yeah, good. My mic and stuff is where I want it to be. So as I mentioned off the top, we were going to continue with some of the websites we started looking at with investigating websites, and we're going to sort of build on that. In particular, we learned how to kind of identify whether a site has a Google AdSense tag, and that obviously is related to advertising. And so we're going to dig into that a bit more. So let's dive in. The same rules apply in the sense that, choose this one, in the sense that I'm going to take you through some exercises, some demonstrations, and if you have questions, concerns, things that kind of pop up as we're doing it, just drop it in the chat. I will pause, I will go, and I will look. So just a reminder, there were a couple of things that I wanted you to do specific to this session, which is to have the Ghostery Chrome web browser plugin installed and to have created free accounts at wellknown.dev and adweek.com. Let me drop these into the chat, and I'm also going to, of course, drop in the slides for you as well. So you've got the slides from last section. All right, here are the things I wanted you to do, and here are the slides. And so you should have these slides and the website slides. I hope you bookmark them. And I'm going to emphasize it again. It would be a really smart thing for you right now to go into your calendar and book off 30 minutes sometime next week for you to just flip through all of these slides that we are covering today. Okay? That is how retention happens. Retention happens if you do the workshop exercises along with me, so you practice doing them. And retention happens if you come back to this material relatively soon, read through it, and then start applying it in your work. If you do those things, this stuff is going to become like second nature, and you're going to spot a lot of stuff you would otherwise miss. All right, so you've got the slides, you've got the tools. We're talking about digital ads. So let me give you a little bit of background on digital ads overall, and we'll talk about the first couple types of ads that we're going to look at. We will be talking about display ads. We will be talking about content ads, and we will also be looking specifically at Facebook ads, which I think are going to be, really important because those together encompass a very big universe of the types of political ads that you're going to probably be seeing, in addition to kind of sponsored posts where maybe people are or are not disclosing that they've been paid to put a political message. All right, so in terms of digital advertising, this is a massive global business. There's more than $500 billion that will be spent on digital advertising alone this year around the world. And when we think about content, digital advertising, it's typically been the way that, news sites and other services on the internet have funded themselves. There's a bit of a trend now towards paid things like, Netflix type stuff, but advertising is still really the financial engine of the web. And when it comes to digital advertising, Google and Facebook earn more money and take more percent of that digital advertising, that those more than $500 billion, than any other companies in the world. They are massive, and so if we are able to understand, who is working with Google through AdSense, for example, to earn money, that's important. If we were able to identify ads on Facebook, that's important, particularly around elections, right? And I'll just say off the top as well, I know that some new rules, some new regulations have come in the Philippines around advertising and politics. I'm certainly not an expert on those, but I think one of the things that you want to have your antennas up for is, one, are candidates and parties adhering to these rules, or are they trying to kind of evade them or break them outright? And two, are the big players like Facebook and Google and any others who are going to accept political ads during the campaign, are they actually enforcing their rules and the rules of the government? Those are, very straightforward things that you can pay attention to potentially find stories, okay? Now, the tricky part is that digital advertising is very technical, it's complex, there's a lot of fraud and a lot of really schemy, crimey things that go on in it. So I really feel that educating reporters on how it works and some of the basic ways of investigating ads is one of the best ways to start really protecting this industry and to actually expose some of the bad stuff that happens, okay? Now, I mentioned the rules around election ads being one area that you may want to pay attention to for this election in terms of generating stories. The other thing you want to think about, not the only thing, but one of the things you want to think about is that advertisers have rules about where the ads want their appear and their ads to appear and not to appear. So for example, most advertisers do not want their ads appearing on pornography websites or websites that are made up of, pirated videos. A lot of them may not want to be on websites with really, hyper-partisan political content. They, maybe they're like a nice, happy lifestyle brand and they don't really want to be associated with that. So when ads are showing up in places where you can expect that the advertisers may not want, that again is a story potentially, because they may have their rules, but the rules get broken, somebody didn't pay attention, and it's a violation of what's called brand safety, of having their ads appear in a quote unquote safe environment. All right. And the last thing, just again, I feel like understanding and knowing the basics and being able to do some investigative work in ads is it's one of the most underutilized, least known areas in all of journalism. I do workshops like this for reporters all around the world. And, there's very few people who understand this industry well, or even just well enough to do stories about it. So I really encourage you to think about how you can use the stuff we're going to cover today to dig into, who's funding a person, an organization, a website, an app, are rules being broken, those kinds of essential things. Okay, so let's talk about our first big group of ads, which are display and content ads. These are, words to describe ads that you're probably very familiar with. And I'm going to show you some examples in a second. But, display and content ads appear on websites and in apps. They can, the most common type of display ad is your traditional banner, right? You go to a website, there's like a, rectangular banner ad advertising something. You can click on it, and you get taken to the advertiser's website. That's a display ad. It's displaying some content. There can be video ads, and then content ads are ads that actually look like articles on the page. You go to a website and there's often those sort of, related content things, and it looks like headlines and thumbnails, but all of those are actually ads. Again, I'm going to show you examples of that, okay? Now, one of the things that is trying to be done in the digital advertising industry is to bring more transparency to it, okay? And so there's this new standard that has come in called Ads Txt, where every publisher that is monetizing with digital ads is actually supposed to have what's called an Ads Txt File, all right? And they're able to find it on their website, and it should list all of the advertising partners they work with. We're gonna talk about Ads Txt files, but you don't have to worry about knowing a lot of the technical things about them, except that this is a place where there should be some transparency. And not every website has an Ads.txt, but when they do have one, it can help you learn who they work with to earn money, okay? And then the last note here is to just be very aware when you visit a website and you see ads. Those ads, if they are being placed automatically, meaning programmatically, so this is where the idea of a programmatic auction comes in, they are being targeted at you. Whatever trail of data and browsing history you have, the data has been collected and they have targeted an ad at you thinking you would be interested in that thing. And that process of getting an ad displayed to a person based on the data that's available of them, that is the tremendously technical process. And it happens in like a split second, where there are advertisers who are trying to reach certain people online, and then there are publishers with apps and websites saying, hey, I have this person with these data details on my website, who wants to show an ad? And there is an auction that takes place in real time where advertisers who are interested in showing an ad to you based on the characteristics that are there will bid, and then whoever wins that auction gets to show you their ad. And that is happening, as I say, just tiny fractions of a second, billions and billions and billions and billions of times every day to show people ads. And that is why it's so technical, and that's why, frankly, it's so easy for people who understand it to kind of get in there and, kind of rig things a little bit in their favor. Okay, so that's enough with the high-level conceptual stuff. Let's take a look at what some ads actually look like, okay? So here I'm going to use it as an example of right-wing American website. This is Gateway Pundit. So here's the homepage, okay? This was from a few months back. If you look at this homepage, I don't know about you, but for me, necessarily, like, there's really not a lot of ads sort of jumping out, right? And one thing I'll say is, if you have installed the Ghostery plugin like I asked you to, Ghostery has an ad blocker. So when you visit a website and you have Ghostery turned on, it's going to block most of the ads, all right? But as we scroll down this particular website, we can start to see where the ads are. And so on the left-hand side, we are a protected class. That is an article. And the other two here are both ads. They do have a little label saying advertisement above them, but you can also see that, the headline text is a similar font, similar color. There's a thumbnail. So they kind of look like articles, don't they? And these are what are called content ads because they are a little more native looking. They look like content. But every time you click on them, that's when the money is changing hands for the ads. And in this case, it's kind of easy to identify where these ads are coming from. Here are the ads. And here in the upper right-hand corner, it says buy ZergNet. So in most cases with ads, the little upper right-hand corner of the ad should tell you the network, the company that helps place those ads on websites, who they are. In this case, it's a company called ZergNet, which places these types of ads across a lot of different websites. We can keep scrolling on the page, and we see another ad here that I've highlighted with the red box. But it's got a different icon in the corner, right? So in this case, we see that Gateway Pundit is working with at least 2 different ad companies to help place ads on its website. In this case, if you click on the little envelope icon, it would tell you that the company is called Power Inbox. They also do email ads placements as well. Okay, so we've been scrolling on the page. We see they've got a bunch of ads provided by different ad networks. This is a really easy thing for you to start practicing when you visit websites. Make sure Ghostery is turned off. Scroll along the home page, along the article page, and see if you can identify where the ads are and who the company is placing those ads. So here's another example. If we take off the home page and we click on an article, when the article page opened, this is what I meant earlier by a display ad, right? This is a traditional kind of banner ad. We're on a home page, we're on an article page, we're off the home page, and here we get a banner ad at the top of the page. That's something you're probably familiar with, right? But who's delivering this ad? Well, what we see here is an X if we wanted to close the ad, and then a little triangle. That triangle is an icon for a program called Ad Choices, which is supposed to give you, as a consumer, more disclosure of ads that are being placed. And so if we click on the triangle in this case, it is placed by Google. So in this case, this is the kind of ad that gets placed by Google AdSense, right? So the other ones were different companies. This banner ad is placed by Google. So that company, this watch strap company, Bellroy, wants to place ads and show them to people. And when I visited this page, I fit whatever profile they had of people who want to buy watch straps. And Google helped Bellroy place its ad on the Gateway Pundit. And so this is how we know how the ads got there. If we were wondering about, why Bellroy's ad showed up on an extreme right-wing website, we could reach out to the company, but we could also contact Google and say, hey, you're working with the Gateway Pundit. Do you have rules about which advertisers can appear there or not? Actually, a few months after I took these screenshots, Google actually removed all ads from the Gateway Pundit. It had finally violated enough policies that Google said, all right, we are not going to work with you anymore. And so that's where you see, like, a website can start to accrue strikes, violations, to the point where certain ad networks may stop working with them. And so if you are aware of websites that are pretty extreme in the Philippines market, and you see which advertisers and ad networks are working with them, that may be something that you want to look further into. What are their rules? What are their standards? And are they being applied? Okay, so ad by Google. Now here's kind of the cool thing with the Ghostery plugin, which is it can start to tell you of those different types of ad trackers and tags that are on a website. And this is why I wanted you to install Ghostery, because I think it's really important for you to start understanding how many of these trackers can be on a website. So let's do this live, okay? We're on the Gateway Pundit. If you have the Ghostery plugin installed, you should do this with me, okay? So here I am on the Gateway Pundit. We can scroll the website here. And do I have an ad blocker on? No, I think my ad blockers are both turned off. So we can see here, we've got an ad. that I'm on. Oh, these are also ads here. You can see here, buy rev content. These ones kind of snuck up on me. I didn't realize that, but yeah, there's the label, advertisement. So you can sort of see, you know, this is an ad right here. Here's another company, MGID, and there's that icon. You can click on it and find out more. So you can see they've got still an even different mix to this day of the companies that are helping place ads on their website, right? Now, if we wanted to understand who their ad tech partners were and what kind of technology they're using, we can use Ghostery for that. So the icon here is a cute little ghost. Let me actually turn it on. So what you will see when Ghostery is turned on is it'll be a cute little blue ghost with this yellow or orange box here with a number in it, okay? So if we open that up and see, you'll see here, there's two options on the top. There's simple view, which is what you will get when you first install Ghostery. So it'll show you this. We don't want that. We want detailed view. So click this here. And you can see what it's doing is it's telling me that there are 27 advertising trackers. And right here it says there's a total count of 37 trackers on the homepage of Gateway Pundit. So here in the advertising tracker section are all of the different advertising technology companies that have basically, you know, those unique tags or code on the page. They can help place ads on Gateway Pundit. So it is connected to all these different kinds of advertising partners to help monetize. Pardon me. And one of the things we don't see here is Google AdSense, right? It used to show AdSense. It doesn't anymore. They do have something from DoubleClick, which is a Google company, but in this case, I don't believe it's actually directly monetizing that. And so you can see a list of partners. We can also see site analytics. It tells us Google Analytics is there. So the Ghostery plugin can give us a sense of how much ad tech and trackers are on a page, which is helpful to know. It can also tell us potentially if we might find a Google Analytics and a Google AdSense tag there. Now, you still need to do that manual confirmation to see if they are there, because sometimes it may be listed here and you don't see it in the source code, which is again is why I taught you how to do that. But this is where Ghostery is kind of cool because it will tell you sort of who its potential partners are. And then as I said, you know, by default, when Ghostery is turned on and it's blue, it's going to block ads. And that's, if you want to actually see the ads, that's where you have to open it and hit Trust Site. Now Ghostery is gray. And if we reload the site, it's going to block some, but not all of the ads. It will block more than would have been there before. In this case, Gateway Pundit still manages to sneak a few through, okay? So this is why I wanted you to have the Ghostery plugin there, just so you can quickly scan and start looking and seeing how many trackers are on different websites. You might be surprised by how many ad trackers are on the different websites that you might see. Oh, and the thing that I wanted to highlight as well is, you know, when I took these screenshots, so the homepage of the Gateway Pundit had 20 trackers at that time, and the article page had 24. I believe the number is higher on both now. But one thing that you'll notice is that article pages and home pages have different numbers of trackers and different ad partners working with them. So it's not enough to just visit the home page. You also need to look at what's going on with article pages, okay? So that's us just visiting a website, identifying the types of ads and the ad partners that are there, and starting to understand more about how they're earning money. And also using Ghostery to see how many partners they have, because it can actually be quite a lot that you can't see just on the page itself, okay? So that's, you know, the recap, lots of ads. Most of them are content ads. These are programmatic, meaning there is a real-time auction that happens to place them. I took out the sponsored content just because I wanted us to be able to move quickly into our exercise here. So let's apply our use of the Ghostery web browser plugin. Our friends at thedailycentury.net. I want you to go and visit the dailycentury.net homepage and see how many trackers are there and who it works with, and then visit an article page. And let's see what result everybody gets, okay? So if you want to do that right now, I'll drop the URL into the chat. Just a really quick, super easy, super fast exercise. As long as you've got Ghostery installed, there we go, dailycentury.net in the chat. How many trackers are on the home page? How many trackers are on the article page when you go and visit it? All right, so let me just keep an eye on the chat here. Go ahead and try that. I'm gonna have a sip of water. All right, and so let's see. Hopefully folks had installed the Ghostery plugin. You can see here, let me have the daily sentry pulled up. And it's kind of neat, you know, when you go to the page, it starts just counting up how many trackers are there. Let's see if anybody's seen it yet. I'll just sort of live demo it here, if nobody is going to necessarily go right away. But again, it's really helpful to actually go to the site. And what you may have noticed if you're watching my page is, you know, you got to actually wait. When I first loaded the page, it was at about 21. It's been going up steadily as I've sort of sat here and let it go. So it's kind of funny. So here, where are we at here? We're at 35, right? So there are 35 trackers, of which 22 are for advertising. We see Google AdSense there. We see Add This. Remember, it had BuiltWith told us there was an Add This tag on the page. And you know, you can see the different ad partners that are there. And some of these are getting blocked by Ghostery for me. If I hit Trust Site, then those will get unblocked. And we can also see Google Analytics, remember? So if we were to go into the source code here and start looking for Google Analytics and AdSense, we might find them there. Now, they may not be there. It's not always 100%, but there's a good indication that there's a Google AdSense tag and a Google Analytics tag in this site, which we had looked at before, right? Okay, so that is the Ghostery plugin. That is looking for trackers, and that is identifying ads on a page. Kind of similar to what we were talking about with like how to read a website and content analysis. It's about paying attention. It's about, you know, clicking on links and identifying what's going on. I wanted to show you one more resource here that may be helpful in making this stuff a little bit more clear. So this is a tool called Blacklight. It's from a nonprofit news organization called The Markup, who do really great work. And they call it a real-time website privacy inspector. What it does is it scans a site for all of the advertising trackers and other kind of tech that's on it. And then it gives you kind of a plain language description of what it found. You know, with Ghostery, it's a great fast way to get a list. It's a great ad blocker, really helpful in that respect. If you're new to this stuff and you want to understand a bit more about what the ad trackers are and what they do, you could scan a website using Blacklight, and it's going to give you a nice report where you can sort of drill down a little bit more. So as that's running, let me actually just open it up in the slides here for expediency's sake. So here's Blacklight. When I ran the dailysentry.net in Blacklight, what it told me is, you know, it had found 40 ad trackers on the site, 93 third-party cookies, meaning your data is being kind of shared through all these different kinds of services. It tells you when you visit this site, it's telling Facebook, so they have a little bit of a tag installed on the site from Facebook that is enabling them, for example, to see like, oh, this is a person who visited our site, and here they are on, you know, on our page on Facebook, and vice versa. So this is how people start to connect your activity together to know how to target ads to you. And then you can see here on the right-hand side, it's telling you some of the ad tech companies that the website interacts with in order to receive ads or other things. And you can actually click on any of these and it'll tell you what the company does. So that's a good way to start educating yourself about what these different partners might do. And that's, you know, just a really helpful way. Let me just see if it finished running it live here. Yeah, you can see it's counting these up, and there's even more third-party cookies now than when I had visited it not too long ago. And you can see here, these ad tech companies, let's see, you know, it's telling you what Adobe does in the advertising world. It's telling you what ComScore does in the advertising world. So a great tool to help you understand more about this stuff if it seems a little bit complicated. Agatha says, I'm only seeing 9, not 35. I'll talk about that in a second. And Marionette says, does the number of ad blocker plugin you have change the number of ads blocked for each blocker? Okay, good questions and kind of related. So, so I have 2 ad blockers. I have Ghostery, which is our little ghosty friend up here. And I also have one called uBlock Origin. Okay, and so, so if you, for example, if you have another ad blocker that might have been running on your page, it's possible that might have blocked some of the trackers, so that could affect how many you're seeing. And if you have multiple ad blockers, it will absolutely affect what ads you see or don't see. So like, for example, with the Gateway Pundit, you know, I've got uBlock Origin and Ghostery turned off. And, you know, if I turn these both on, let's just see here how many of these ads actually stick around, okay? And by having two, I usually can get rid of most of the ads. So like, look here, it looks like, yeah, I pretty much was able to zap all of them. But if I turned one of those off, it's possible that, some ads might slip through. So I do have two ad blockers. It does seem to work better having two. And, so that's a scenario where, depending if you're just using one, sure, some stuff might slip through. And just to get back to the point of seeing a lower number of trackers when you are loading it with Ghostery, it's entirely possible that, based on your browsing history and your browsing profile, you may see a different number of trackers than me. And so that's where I think the blacklight tool is really helpful, because it's going to scan it in a sort of neutral way. But I do encourage you to maybe try, reloading the page, making sure all of your ad blockers are turned off, including Ghostery, and rerunning it and seeing how many ad trackers you get. And maybe that will help. All right. So let's continue our investigation here of the Gateway Pundit. We visited the site. We looked at the ads that were on the website. We started understanding how those ads were getting placed and which ad networks it worked with. And so let's take an example. Let's say, you're on a website, you see an election ad. What would you do to start understanding more about that ad? So let's take as an example here, one of the ads that I saw, pardon me, on the Gateway Pundit. Okay, so here's an ad, and I thought it was funny and worth looking at, because the headline it showed me when I was there is, "The worst city in America is found in Ontario." Well, Ontario is in Canada. So, clearly they were trying to do something clever here, where depending on where you were visiting from, they put, your state or your province in there. Probably worked well for people in the United States because they'd see their own state. Doesn't work so well from somebody visiting from Canada, because it's pretty funny for someone to say the worst city in America is found in Ontario. All right, so I decided to say, all right, let me click on this ad and let me see what I can find out about the people who bought it. All right, so here is what happens. I click on the ad, and it takes me to a website called itsthevibe.com. And what I see here is, I'm on an article page, and the headline is "America's Most Miserable Cities Ranked," and it's a slideshow. So basically, I have to click through over and over and over again to read each page and each piece of content. That's a good way for them to get you to load a lot of pages, and a good way for them to get you to load a lot of ads, right? So clearly they're buying ads to get me to come to their website, and hoping that I visit their website for a long time and make them a lot of money by viewing ads. And if we want to understand more about how this is working, we could go back to SimilarWeb. If you remember, we learned about, I think it was Daily Sentry. Yeah, dailySentry.net, looking at SimilarWeb. And in the case of itsthevibe.com, so that's the website that the ad took us to. It gets a lot of visits, 4.7 million. Wow. 8 pages per visit. That's where the slideshow is coming in. I think people keep clicking through, and people were spending almost 4 minutes on the page. That's pretty impressive. People apparently like slideshows. What else can we learn here? Well, this is kind of interesting. So when I grabbed these stats, they were for October, November, and December. October, they had a monster month, 53 million visits, and then it just dropped off like crazy in November and December. That is puzzling, isn't it? Why would that happen? Why would they lose such a huge percentage of their audience when apparently the site was doing really well and people were spending lots of time on it? And so that's something that we might want to understand better. And we start to understand it a little bit better when we look at what's called the marketing channels overview. So this is, again, if you remember, when we looked at it for the Daily Sentry, it was all about social, right? It was what was it? More than 80% or 90% of its audience came from social, which we saw clearly was Facebook. In this case, it's different. In this case, they have a significant portion coming from display, almost 20%. So that means display ads. That means the ad that I saw, a significant portion of their audience is coming from ads. So they are literally buying their audience, and also from email. And that's ads and emails as well. So they are buying a good 30% or so, according to this, of their audience. They're spending money on ads to get the people to come to their website, and then they hopefully earn money from the ads that people view on the website. And here's where we come to the direct portion. If you remember, when we looked at the Daily Sentry, I said, look, direct is supposed to be people who are very loyal and who type in the website to visit it or who bookmark the website. You know, like I have bookmarks on my browser, you know. Pardon me, that was a big yawn. It's 10:18 here. You can see I'm an old man if I'm yawning already. You know, I have sites bookmarked, like Canadian news sites, US news sites. And so when I click on those bookmarks, that's going to show up as direct. But let's just remind ourselves what this website is again. It has this kind of content. It is a slideshow site. It is buying ads, literally, to get people to come to its website. So when I see something like they're supposedly getting 63% of their audience direct, of people typing it in, there's something wrong there. And this is what I had warned you about earlier, which is that when SimilarWeb is unable to classify certain traffic, like they can't see whether it's coming from search or display ads, it ends up putting it in the direct bucket. So direct can absolutely be people who are typing in a website and visiting it, but it can also be a whole bunch of other traffic that for whatever reason SimilarWeb has not been able to categorize or has miscategorized. And the reason that I know that that number is not really accurate is, you know, in months before I looked at this, the stats were very different. So here's an older look earlier in the year. If you remember, we're looking at October, November, and December, and their direct was really high. Well, actually, if we go to several months before that, we see, in fact, that display and mail were much higher. They accounted for almost about 45% of traffic coming from ads, and direct was lower. And so it's pretty clear that this is a website that buys a significant portion or the vast majority of its audience. And what's helpful for this is, you know, if you click on an ad and it takes you to a website and you see that that website, you know, gets most of its traffic from advertising, then that's clearly a website designed. It's made for advertising. It's made to be driving people to it. But if it's a news site doing that, you know, that's less common, isn't it? Most news sites do not buy their audience. They earn it through social. They earn it through people sharing it. And so this is where, you know, it's a bit of a red flag that this website seems to exist simply to buy ads to drive people to it. And there's lots of websites like that. It's called a made for advertising website, where it is made, you know, to earn money from people clicking on ads going to it. And when they decide to stop buying ads, that's when traffic can drop off, like we see here. You know, what happened from October to November? My guess is they stopped buying so many ads, and that's why not as many people went to the site. Okay, so this can be a helpful thing for understanding, again, the audience. But what about ads themselves? All right, and this is why I wanted you to create a free account at AdBeat. AdBeat is a really useful tool, although I want to give one warning here, which is that, you know, this and other tools, sometimes they have like a US bias where their best data is for stuff related to the US. So I can't promise you that, you know, every advertiser domain that you enter into AdBeat for the Philippines is going to show up and have good data, but it's worth trying. And in this case, what I did was I just simply typed in, it's thevibe.com, and AdBeat is able to tell me data about the ads that it's buying. So SimilarWeb tells me about its audience, right? Which we can see, big portion coming from them buying ads. AdBeat tells me the ads. It tells me, for example, when I ran this search that It's the Vibe had run over 2,000 ads that month. And we could see that, you know, it was dropping off in the number of ads that it was running. From December, it had a lot more, and then January, it starts to sort of calm down, not running as many ads. Again, maybe that's why, you know, traffic starts to go down. We can see that it's running ads on 913 different publishers, and then it lists over there on the far right-hand side the kinds of publishers where ads are appearing. If you see interesting election ads, and the domain that those ads are driving people to is in AdBeat, you should be able to see where the ads are appearing and the types of ads that they're running, and that can be really helpful. And it also will show me, you know, the type of ads and the images and stuff that they're using. So AdBeat has a higher paid level, which can go really, really in depth, but it is always worth trying to throw in the URL, the domain name of the sort of where the ad took you, to see if adbeat.com is going to have data about it. Okay, and if you do that, you may really understand how big of an ad campaign it is for that particular one you saw, how many sites they're running on, what other variations of ads they're doing, and that's going to help you piece together how big a given ad campaign is. Because sometimes, you know, maybe they're just running one ad, But most of the time, an ad campaign, especially with a decent amount of money behind it, they're running multiple ads on lots of different websites. They're testing things out to see which ones work best. And AdBeat might be able to help you understand what kind of ads they're running and what kinds of ads they're testing. So Ads.txt. Early on, at the top, I told you that Ads.txt is kind of a new digital ad standard, which requires websites and apps to disclose the ad partners they work with. So when we saw, for example, by opening Ghostery, we saw the different types of ad partners they work with. And with Ads.txt, a website should be listing, it's the nature of its relationship with those different companies, all right? So here's the basic thing about this. Ads.txt will tell you who helps a given website earn money. They're supposed to list the ad networks that they are working with in this file, which appears on their website, okay? And there are kind of two different types of relationships that can be described in an Ads.txt file. And don't worry, we're gonna look at one in a second, so you'll see what I mean. But a relationship can be marked as direct, which means me, Craig Silverman's website, I work directly with Google to earn money for this website. So that means I have an account with Google AdSense, I get money from them, we work directly together. Another way that it can be labeled is a reseller. And in that case, it's like, well, I work with this, intermediary party, and they can represent my site to get it sold to all different kinds of people who I don't have any direct relationship with. So a reseller means, typically there is not a direct relationship between that one site and ultimately all of the different entities that are helping place money on it. The direct connection is much stronger and clearer. It is much more useful for journalistic purposes because there's a relationship between that ad network and that publisher directly, okay? And so that's why we care about direct relationships the most. And I'm gonna show you a tool called well-known.dev, which takes all the technical complexity out of these files and lets you view them and navigate them in a way that's really helpful. Okay, so how do you find an ads.txt file? As you see here on the second bullet point, it's simply the domain name / ads.txt. So what we're looking at is itsthevibe.com / ads.txt. That's what we're interested in. All right, so here it is highlighted, and this is what it actually looks like. So some ads.txt files, like the one we're looking at here, can have a lot of listings. Like you can see here, they've got so many different partners and types that they have had to organize them alphabetically, right? Here's the A's, here's the C's. And you can see here how they're labeling some as direct and some as reseller. And what you can also see is next to direct and next to reseller, there is a unique account ID. So if we look under Amazon at the very top, we see that it says 3284, direct. So 3284 is the account ID directly associated with It's the Vibe and its sort of company for Amazon. That is their ID. It should only be used by It's the Vibe and its kind of sister sites owned by the same publisher. It is a direct relationship directly with Amazon. That is their account. Whereas when you go down to something like contextweb.com, that is labeled reseller, 558299, there could be hundreds or thousands of sites sort of monetizing through the 558299 reseller ID because that's probably some third-party agency helping earn money for all these websites. So direct is what we care about the most, all right? So let's stop right now and just test our ability to find ads.txt files. So what I want you to do is find the ads.txt files of the dailycentury.net and our old friends at Maharlika News. And I want you to tell me how they're different, all right? So let me put these two domains here in for you. So just as a helpful reminder, here's where we found the ads.txt file for itsthevibe.com. So how would you find it for the dailycentury.net? Where would you go to do that? All right, I'll give you guys a couple minutes. So once you have looked at both of them, please tell me what you see as a difference between these two sites that we have previously been looking at and investigating a little bit. Okay. All right, let me quickly check the chat here, see if anybody, all right, wonderful. Agatha, so for Maharlika News, she's got, there's the Google Direct ID there. Right, so Maharlika News, I guess it's pretty simple, right? They've got, oh, there we go. Yeah. So Maharlika News, very simple. It's got one Google Pub ID. It is labeled direct, and that's it. And so Agatha found that. And then Cherry Ann shows us that Daily Sentry has got a whole bunch of stuff, and some of them are direct, and some of them are reseller, right? And so, as Marionette points out, Daily Sentry has a number of resellers, whereas Maharlika has only one direct. And so, just by looking at the ads.txt file, you can sort of see that, okay, one of these has like a much more complex advertising setup going on here, works with a whole bunch of different partners. The other one, they're just working with Google directly, right? And so, once again, we're learning still more and more about learning and understanding information about websites, understanding information about how they monetize, how they earn money. And so you start to see how, these two sessions that we've been doing today really connect, because obviously we're talking about websites and how those websites earn money, and understanding how to identify the ads on the site, understanding how to find an ads.txt file really starts to underline for us, what's going on. And sorry, here we go. Okay, so let's now continue on to our friends at well-known.dev. And so I really want you to make sure you've created a free account here, because some of the things I'm going to show you will only show up if you have a free account. I know the guy who built this site. You can trust him with your sign-in info. Don't worry about it. We want to go to well-known.dev, and we want to make sure that we are logged in. Okay, so when we go to the site, this is what it looks like. You get there, and it basically is inviting you to enter in the search bar. So what would you enter? Well, we could enter, for example, the dailysentry.net. We could put that in there, and then it would give us some results. Okay, but let's continue with our friends at It's the Vibe, and let's put it in there. Let's search itsthevibe.com, and here's what we get. So we get to the page, and it's telling us, there's an option to look at the direct records. That's what we want. Remember, we want the direct ones where they're directly working with someone. So we click on direct records, and we can see a bunch of different Google IDs, right? And if you remember, in the ads.txt file of itsthevibe.com, some of the Google publisher IDs were labeled as direct, and some of them were labeled as reseller. And here we can actually kind of see how that plays out in action. So you can see that there's all these pub-IDs listed here, and then there's the little magnifying glass icon. And next to that, we have a little number in brackets, right? We have 5, 399, 1,773, 5, and on and on and on. So again, the best kind of comparison that I can make here is to our lesson that we learned about IP addresses. The fewer the number of websites hosted on an IP address, the more it was possible that they might be connected. And so the same rule applies here. The lower the number and the more consistent we see that number in these results, the more likely that is to be, the true direct publisher ID, and the more likely that it's the actual one connected to the company running that website. Okay, so the most consistent number that we see here is 5. It's 5 in all the Google ones. It's 5 in GumGum. It's 5 in indexexchange.com. So chances are, by looking at this, and again, you're only going to see those number 5s if you're logged in. Okay, if you're not seeing them, you need to log in. Chances are, the real network here is 5 sites that are connected, and that ID associated with it probably belongs to the company behind the website. And so we can do 2 things here. We can click on the 5, and we can also click on, in this case with Google, the publisher ID. So the top one there, 16488988646, on and on. We can click on that and see what it tells us. So right, again, we care about the 5s. They are really speaking to us right now. So if we click on the publisher ID, this is what we get. It's telling us that, in fact, there are 7 direct sites connected to that. And it's also telling us, if you look on the left-hand side, a company name, Spine Media LLC. So what we've been able to do is, by looking at its ads.txt in well-known, we're able to actually identify the company that is associated with its Google Publisher ID. You can't get that by searching in spy on web or those things. That is information that is kind of encoded in the publisher ID that well-known is able to actually extract for you. So what we can see here is that It's the Vibe is part of a network of, it looks like, 7 publisher sites. We'll visit those in a second, owned by the same entity, Spine Media LLC. So we're able to now start connecting to a corporate entity in the top. And again, I want to emphasize the way that I got to that was by clicking on the Google Publisher ID, not on the 5, because we'll click on that in a second, but on the Publisher ID, because that gave us information about how many sites were using that ID, and it told us it was Spine Media. Now, if we click on those sites over here, we get a list of sites that seem to be using the same Google Publisher ID, which is registered to Spine Media. So we kind of learned 2 different ways of using Google Publisher IDs, Google AdSense IDs or tags, to connect sites together. We learned the manual way where we identify it in the source code, and then we take the ID and we search it in places like Spy on Web and DNSlytics, and that gave us a bunch of websites. But there's also a way to look on wellknown.dev at the ads.txt file and to see if that publisher ID, that pub dash whatever, is actually associated with the company as it was here, Spine Media, and also if there are other websites connected to it. So we have multiple ways of connecting websites together, and we also have a way of understanding who a website works with in order to make money. And so we could obviously continue to investigate these other websites. Do they also earn money by buying traffic? How do they monetize? But it's clear that they are all connected back to our friends at Spine Media LLC. Okay, so now let's do our example relevant to where all of you are. Open up wellknown.dev and drop in the dailysentry.net. Little tip there is, so I'll drop in the URL again, but drop in the URL like this. Do not put HTTP in front of it. Do not put a backslash on the end, or it will not search in well-known dev. So you want to put this in here and search it there. All right, so here's a question from Richie. Please, everybody, go to well-known. Let me type that in here for you. And just practice looking through the ads.txt file of the dailysentry.net. So Richie has asked, is the ads.txt standard required for all sites regardless of the location of the host? Good question. So the location of the host is not a relevant factor in this. Ads.txt is not kind of required in the world. However, if you want to earn money from places like Google's, very big and popular ad network, Google strongly encourages and really is pushing more and more and more for sites that are monetizing with it to have an ads.txt file. So a lot of the ad networks are really asking and encouraging websites to have one. And in fact, if you don't have one and people are using Google's tools to buy ads through Google's network, you might be excluded. So there is a financial incentive for websites, especially those earning money with Google's ad networks, to actually have an ads.txt file. Now, that being said, there are plenty of sites that don't have them. If you are a very small site and you aren't monetizing with Google, you probably won't have an ads.txt file. So do not be surprised if you go to a website and look for its ad.txt file and it's not there. You will encounter that. That is a thing that will happen. It is not required by law or by industry, but it is being strongly, strongly encouraged, and there are incentives that make it something that publishers should really want to do, in particular if they want to be in Google's ad network. And a lot of people want to be in Google's ad network. Okay, Agatha has asked, if we append ads.txt to a website URL and the browser says page not found, yep, is it possible that the file exists but it's hiding it? So that's a good question. I would say that's unlikely. If they have gone to the trouble of creating an ads.txt file, they are going to want to have it there because that's where it's getting scanned by a lot of places, not just by wellknown.dev, but by some automated tools that are out there. So that is where, if they have an ads.txt, it should be there. That being said, you may be asking, because it is possible, for example, for websites to hide certain pages from being indexed by search engines. You can actually, set it so Google is not allowed to sort of crawl certain pages on your website. But when it comes to ads.txt, I can't really think of a good reason why somebody would want to have an ads.txt, but then to not have it available there in the place where they're supposed to have it, because that's where it's being scanned by ad networks and other places to show that you are compliant with the standard. So I think it's unlikely, but it's a good question because it raises the fact that people can hide certain pages from search engines. That is something that can be done, and it's good that people are aware of that. All right, so hopefully you ran Daily Sentry in wellknown.dev. Why don't I just do it really quickly, and then we're going to hit our last final Facebook section here. So look, dailysentry.net, what do we get? It's ad.txt, right? That's what we want. We click on that. And then we're interested in direct records. Direct records is pretty simple here. There's two of them. There's one for Google. There's one for Taboola. Am I not logged in? I'm not logged in. Let me log in. Goodness me. Because it wasn't showing me the little numbers. We got to have the numbers. All right. There we go. Beautiful. Thank you. We're back. Okay. So here we are. And we can see here, it's telling us here's the Google publisher ID. Here's Taboola. And it's saying there's 3 connected sites on Google, 2 connected on Taboola. Remember with It's the Vibe, we clicked on the publisher ID and it told us the company name. In this case, it's not listing a company name, which is very common, just so you know. A lot of companies will not actually disclose their name. But we can also click on the 3 direct sites, and what do we see? We see News Spy, which is familiar. We see TFN Press, and we see the Daily Sentry. So the ads.txt files for all of these websites list those same Google IDs, which is another point of connection between all of them, okay? So that's another way we're sort of stacking it, but I just want to go back. Let's click on the Taboola ID. How about that? Does that tell us anything? Hey, look at this. We've got a company name, but it looks like a person's name, Ray and Aguio. So this is why, this is helpful, right? Google one doesn't list a name, doesn't list a company, but the Taboola one, we get somebody's name. And so now we have got the name of somebody who appears to be relatively important with this Daily Sentry, important enough that they are listed as the sort of point of contact on the Taboola ad account. So there we go. We just found a connection for the dailysentry.net that could be very helpful for us for figuring out who is behind it, right? Super. Okay, so that's another reason why wellknown.net is of interest to us. Okay, here we are. We're in the home stretch, everybody. You've been doing a great job so far. I hope you're still awake and with it. We're going to talk now about Facebook ads. And I think this one is obviously really important in the Philippines around an election. Facebook is a massively powerful, widely used platform. It's also where a lot of people try to get away with stuff, as you know better than me, in terms of elections in the Philippines. And Facebook ads are a big factor. Now, I am aware that there are new regulations in the Philippines around political ads. I'm aware that social media platforms have some new responsibilities. I am not intimately aware of the specifics of all of those. So if you have questions about that specific to Facebook, I'm probably not the best person to answer. But hopefully, me showing you how to identify ads on Facebook and search ads on Facebook, you can then apply your knowledge of the rules and the laws to potentially turn up some good stories, right? Okay, so let's talk about Facebook ads. I'm gonna have a quick drink. All right, what do we get here? Okay, so Facebook ads, one of the reasons why Facebook earns so much money for ads is, they have tons of people on their platform. They collect tons of data about them, which enables people to target ads at very, specific and unique categories with a decent amount of accuracy. If I wanted to target, ads at people in a particular part of Toronto who really like soccer and are men between the ages of, 18 and 27, Facebook would probably give a list and say, okay, I've found 5,000 people in that part of Toronto who fit that description. And that kind of targeting is what advertisers want. And so you can imagine in the context of an election, being able to very thinly slice and target people, the kinds of stuff that you could maybe do, right? When you buy ads, you can run them across Facebook and Instagram, and some ads can also run on WhatsApp now. And Facebook also has a program where they work with websites So websites not owned by Facebook, but websites that's similar to Google AdSense have decided to work with Facebook to allow Facebook to help place ads on them. So that's where ads can run. Facebook has very detailed ads and commerce policies that govern what types of ads are allowed to appear, what those ads can look like, and what kind of claims they can make, and what industries are not allowed to place ads. So, for example, Facebook, you should never see an alcohol ad, an ad for sexual services, for tobacco. Those things should never be on Facebook. You see ads for any of those things, somebody has broken the rules, and Facebook has failed to enforce them. Facebook also has very specific rules around things like you cannot use before and after images to advertise a product. That's meant, around weight loss and things like that. They don't want to reinforce negative body issue things. You shouldn't, if you see ads with sensational claims or overly sexualized images, those things are not allowed in Facebook ads. And you can, I'll drop a link into the policies in a second, but familiarizing yourself with its policies is another good way to identify stories, because if Facebook is taking money for ads that break its policies, and it is profiting from rule breaking, isn't it, right? Now, here's the thing that is really key and really relevant for you. Facebook, in addition to whatever laws have been brought in by the government in the Philippines, Facebook has its own rules around political and social issues ads. And what the deal is in most countries is that if you want to run political ads on Facebook, you have to register with Facebook. You have to prove that you are located in the country where you want to run these political ads. You have to prove your ID, and you have to say, who the ads are being bought on behalf of, right? So there's ID approval. And then once you start buying political ads on Facebook, they're supposed to meet a higher level of disclosure. They will show, how much money was spent on a particular ad, what kind of targeting was used for it, these kinds of things, okay? And so that's why political ads on Facebook, there's an interesting level of transparency. It's not perfect, but it's better than some other platforms in that we can actually learn more about political advertisers on Facebook and look at archived versions of ads, political ads that ran in the past on Facebook as well. So political ads on Facebook require pre-registration. There are specific rules about the kinds of ads you can run. The ads, when they run, list more information about the targeting and money spent on them than a regular ad does. And political ads, unlike any other type of ad on Facebook, are archived for 7 years. So we're able to actually search in the archive and pull up old political ads, okay? And then when it comes to just like regular ads on Facebook, for products and services, they aren't archived, they show less information. And unless that ad is active at the moment you went searching for it, you will not find it. Once it is no longer active, it does not appear in Facebook's ad library, and it's gone pretty much forever, okay? I'm going to show you examples of this in a second, but those are some of the key things to be aware of with Facebook ads. So the tool that you need to know about is the Facebook ad library. This is the location of it up there in the top that you can see. And let me just walk you through some of the basic kind of searching options here. So when you come to the Facebook ad library, a few tips, one is it's going to give you, instead of showing Canada, it's going to show Philippines. And so you can choose to search within ads of a particular country, or you can search across, all countries. You can also choose the category of ads you want to look at. So one of the things that you need to be aware of is that you need to make sure you have ghostery turned off and any ad blockers you have turned off. The Facebook ad library will not work if you have ad blockers turned on. So if you are on the ad library right now and it's not working well, turn off ghostery, turn off any other ad blockers, refresh the page, okay? So as I mentioned, there's the country filter. You can see here, this is what it looks like when you click on it. So, my default location is Canada, yours will be the Philippines. And you can change it to a different country, or you can change it to all. And then there's the category. So when you click on category, you have a choice to search through all ads, or only search through issues, elections, or politics ads. Okay, so those are ads where people have registered to run them. They have been archived, all that stuff we already talked about. Okay, now here's the thing. You have this search bar here, and there's two ways to search in the Facebook ad library. So in this example, I just put in Xinjiang as a search term. And you can see what it's doing here is it's giving me the option to choose specific advertisers. So I put in my keyword and it's saying, hey, we have some pages with the word Xinjiang in them. Do you just want to see ads from these particular advertisers? So like if, I don't know, if Duterte has like a main Facebook page and you type in Duterte in, the search term, his page would pop up. And if you clicked on the icon for his page, it would show you all the ads from his page, but only his page. Whereas if you just keep the search term in there and don't pick a particular advertiser, it will look for that keyword, okay? So it's the difference between searching with a particular advertiser for their ads or searching a keyword across all ads, all right? And so in this case, I just kept Xinjiang as a keyword, and I wanted to see ads that were just using that in any way, shape, or form. And here's, an example of like the kind of results I got. So like at the very top here, you can see it's telling me there's about 900 results. So 900 ads or ad variations have been run using this word when I did this search back in the summer. And what we see is the first few results here are like, a tourist site promoting the region. So this would be like a Chinese government initiative here to sort of, promote the region as a great place for tourism, right? And so we can see also that these ads are active. We can see that they started running in early August, and that there's a Facebook icon there. If you see that in the right-hand corner of all the ads, that means it ran on Facebook. It doesn't look like it ran on Instagram. If we keep scrolling, we start to see more kinds of ads. So we see China Southern Airlines promoting tourism to Xinjiang. We also see CGTN, which is Chinese state-controlled media, running videos promoting the region as well. And so, what we see here is like an effort to really run ads promoting the region as a great place, where obviously there are lots of other people talking about the treatment of Uyghurs there and discrimination and putting them in camps. And the CGTN ad, if you look in the upper right-hand corner of that, it's showing us a Facebook icon, an Instagram icon, a Facebook audience network icon, and a Facebook Messenger icon. So I left that one off. You can also run ads on Facebook Messenger now. So that one ran across multiple platforms owned by Meta. If we keep scrolling, this is where, you can kind of start to get some interesting results, because like I did the search term because I know, there's a big debate and a big argument and political, heated arguments and disputes around Xinjiang and treatment of Uyghurs there, right? And so this is where we start to see that debate and that controversy playing out in the form of Facebook ads. We see a CGTN ad again, creating a very, positive point of view of the region and people in it. And we see ads from Amnesty International talking about systematic abuses suffered by Uyghurs, Kazakhs, and other predominantly Muslim ethnic minorities in internment camps and prisons in China. And so we have two very different points of view on Xinjiang, and the Facebook ad network searching in there, we can see who is paying to really get their point of view across, right? And by the way, just as a note on the Amnesty International ad here, you can see it's saying 7 ads use this creative and text. So you'll see this a lot, and there's 2 things here. So number one, that result at the very top that said, I think there was like 600 or so ads, right, with that word. These 7 variations of the same ad are included in that count. But the other thing that's notable here is when you see an ad that has a lot of different variations, as in this case, that often means it's one of the more successful and effective ads, because if they're running an ad and it's doing well, they may reuse that same creative and text and target it at different people because it's performing well. So just as you scroll through the ad network, when you see ones with lots of variations, chances are that ad is performing well for the advertiser. Okay, so here's an example of 2 ads that came up that were really interesting and the kinds of things that you want to look for during an election, okay? So on the left-hand side here, we see an ad from somebody named Travis Lindbergh for Congress. And you can see underneath his name, it says paid for by Travis Jason Lindbergh. And we can also see on the bottom there, amount spent, roughly about $100, and potential reach 500,000 to 1 million people. If you notice, all of the other ads we looked at did not have any of those details. It didn't say paid for by, it didn't say amount spent, potential reach. And we also didn't get any other inactive ads, because if you see the very top of that ad, it says inactive. So this is an example of an ad that has been properly labeled as political. It tells us who paid for it. It is archived even though it's inactive. and it gives us some basic information about the spend and the reach. So in the Philippines, when there are political advertisers who have registered properly, you should be able to see this information about their ads. If you see a political ad that does not have that kind of information, it means that they have not registered as a political advertiser and either on purpose or accidentally have basically gotten around Facebook's rules. And that's what the example on the right is here. So this is an ad that is clearly political. It's about Uyghurs. It's about China's what he calls systemic gang rape against Uyghur families. So very strong political language. This is clearly something that should have been forced to go through the political ad registration process, I would think, but it didn't, because it doesn't tell us who paid for it. It doesn't tell us how much they spent. It doesn't tell us potential reach. And what's also interesting to me when I saw this was, the Facebook page itself is not very descriptive. It just says Kuzat, and it's got like the default icon there, just like a K. It doesn't even have someone's photo or a logo. And so I was like, so this is an ad that kind of snuck through. And when I clicked on see ad details there on the bottom, they're just highlighting the stuff up there. And then we get over to this page and we click on see ad details. Here's what's interesting. I mean, the page that ran this ad has 0 likes, right? So it's like, okay. But if we know the kind of purpose of the ad there on the left-hand side is to get people to visit an Instagram profile. So it's actually a Facebook ad running to promote an Instagram account using, Uyghur families as kind of the topic. And we can sort of see there that the Kuzat Instagram account has more than 73,000 followers. So either they've been getting a lot of followers from this, or they had a lot. But suddenly we've been able to learn, seems like a very new page, has no likes, promoting an Instagram profile, running a political ad, did not go through the proper registration process. And you can sort of go from there and learn more. Like, we could visit the page, we could visit the Instagram profile, learn who they are. And so the lesson here for you is, 1, this is an example of how you can use the ad library. But 2, you should pay attention to political ads that are not being properly labeled. You should pay attention to the political ads that are running and are properly labeled. And you should also be thinking about searching by keywords for hot topics and hot button issues. And you should also probably spend time looking at the ads from specific important advertisers that you're interested in. And so those are strategies of making the Facebook ad library work for you. And the last thing that I would just emphasize is you need to be consistent about it, because as I said off the top, if an ad has not been properly labeled as political, it will disappear from the ad library as soon as it stops being active. Because it was not properly labeled as political, it's going to disappear. So if you are checking consistently in the ad library, you are more likely to turn up stuff and find stories than someone who is only going in there every few weeks. They're going to miss lots of stuff. All right, so to wrap up here, we can pay close attention to how a website is earning money by looking at the types of ads that are on there. AdBeat is a great tool for understanding the types of ads, the number of ads that an advertiser might be running. Ads.txt is an emerging standard which can give us a sense of the nature of the relationships that a publisher has with different kinds of ad partners. And wellknown.dev was the site we used to actually navigate that and learn more. You remember in the case of the dailysentry.net, we clicked on the Taboola ID number and boom, we got the name of a person who appears to be affiliated with that site. And then we dove into the ad library, understanding the difference between registered political ads and non-political ads, and figuring out how to dig in on that. And just to reinforce again, ad searches are a great way to understand more about the people, the actors, the campaigns, and how to figure out how entities, websites are earning money and battling for attention. Okay, so look, we've got a bit of time for questions. But I would encourage you to kind of use the ad library right now. Maybe search for a particular page. You want to see if it's running ads. Search for a keyword or two and see what you get. And I would love to take some questions and see if anybody has any comments. So let me take a look in the chat and see what we've got here. Okay. So good. So it looks like Richie had done the exercise with Daily Sentry, and you saw it connected to 3 other sites. Remember, you know, we can, for you and for Ival John there, you know, yes, looking and clicking on Taboola shows the name. Richie, you found that. That's awesome. So that's great. I would just invite anybody who's got any question, any comment whatsoever, anything we covered, anything you want me to repeat, anything you think I can be helpful with. Now is the time to fire it off. We've got a few minutes left. I'm happy to do that for you. And also happy if anybody finds anything interesting searching in the ad library for you to share that now. All right, so let me answer this question here from Monique as we have our last kind of 10 minutes together. So Monique has asked, have I taken a look at who among the presidential candidates in the Philippines have ads on Facebook? One candidate leading the surveys claims to not have any. I'm just curious. You know what, Monique, I have not done that. I can tell you that I am interested in sort of keeping an eye on what's going on in your election. I think like a lot of people in North America, the truth is that I hadn't been paying a lot of attention to elections in the Philippines prior to 2016. But since then, you know, I've been paying more attention to it. So I have not looked at that, but I think it's a really good thing for you to be looking at. I mean, and actually let me stop presenting for a moment. If you have a presidential candidate who is claiming to not run any Facebook ads, to me, that is an invitation to spend time looking very closely. And what I would suspect, and so a lot of my knowledge of elections in the Philippines comes from the work of Jonathan Corpusong. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a great researcher, and he's probably back in the Philippines preparing for the election now, where, you know, what's happening a lot is there's what the official candidates and official campaigns do. But as a lot of you probably know, there's a lot of arm's length activity that goes on. So supporters of this candidate may be the ones buying the ads. They may have contracted with a PR firm who is the ones buying the ads, paying the influencers, doing all of that. And so what this strikes me as is an interesting claim by this candidate, because yes, maybe their direct campaign is perhaps not buying Facebook ads. Maybe that's part of their strategy. But I would be very surprised if that candidate had no ads about them, period. And I would be very surprised if there wasn't an effort by some of the supporters, either with that candidate's knowledge or without that candidate's knowledge, to make sure that they are buying ads on Facebook to influence people and promote that candidate as much as possible. And so for me, that is an invitation to look every single day, search on that candidate's name, search on that candidate's party, search on any other related keywords to that candidate, you know, the topics they're talking about, what have you, to see if you can identify the entities that are in fact running ads supporting them. And then I would see who is paying for that, what is their connection to the candidate, and can we identify any strong connections between the candidate and their campaign, or, you know, their main advisors, and the entities that are paying for those ads. You know, that to me is like a perfect example of how I might want to exploit and look at the ad library. But this sort of brings it also back to one of those fundamental points I made before we started yesterday, which is that it's really key to be consistent and to monitor this stuff. So, you know, I literally would make a list of keywords. I literally would open the ad library every day, and I would search all of those, okay? So that would be my attempt. And we've got a couple of people weighing in here. So Ruth talks about some of the regulations that are in place. And so the body is going to be regulating and monitoring their websites and social media accounts. They're going to have to register their official and verified sites. And so the question here is there a really way to do that, measure the ads? Some are not political, if some are not classified as political ads. So I absolutely think that, you know, yes, it's great that there's tighter regulation of advertising and social media around elections. That's probably a good step forward, although it's always in the execution of it. And so what are the chances that there are ads that have not been properly classified as political? What are the chances that Facebook or these regulatory bodies have missed things? I honestly would say they're probably pretty good. Facebook is such a big platform. And as you all know, there are so many people on Facebook in the Philippines. that it would be very surprising to me that some stuff would not slip through. It would also be very surprising for me, given the history of some of the, the approaches to dark PR and what have you, if people weren't trying. And so, my whole thing would be, I would 100% be trying to find the people trying to evade this stuff, trying to get around it. If they're saying that they are banning micro-targeting, that's great, but can we actually test whether that ban is taking effect? And can we test whether Facebook is enabling it to be possible to actually ban micro-targeting? So here's another idea I'll throw to you. If you have a Facebook account, you can easily also create a Facebook ads account. And what you may want to do is run a test. Can you run a political ad? Can you micro-target it? And can you actually get that to appear on Facebook? And if you can, then obviously there's a problem. Now, you obviously want to set this up in a way that is responsible. You want to talk, with your editor or your newsroom or what have you, and think about how you could design this as an experiment that is, not causing problems, but is actually proving a point. So I would think about testing those regulations. I would think about testing how prepared Facebook is for this. And I would think about testing the honesty and the accuracy of the claims that these candidates are making. Okay, Cherry has followed in talking about a story she did on the Facebook ad spending so far of 2022 candidates. And so she had actually looked in this candidate, no recorded ad spending on the platform. But there are some ads on Facebook, not from his official page endorsing him. Well, there you go. So the question for me in that scenario is there any actual connection between the candidate and their campaign and those sort of unofficial ads? Because it wouldn't be so hard to make that promise, but then to know that you're going to have your supporters and arm's length people buying Facebook ads. So I would love to figure that out. All right, so here's a question also that Yvonne has passed along. Since Google has banned political ads in the Philippines, are there workaround ways to pay for ads that are still solely promoting a candidate? All right, so this is actually very similar to what happened in Canada. They brought in some new rules for our federal elections, and Google was supposed to meet a higher standard of disclosure and archiving of ads, and Google literally looked at the rules and said, no thanks. And so they just said, we will not accept political ads in Canada whatsoever, okay? So are there workaround ways by candidates? Yes, there probably are some workaround ways. And so how do you monitor the Google ads? Because obviously ads being run through Google's ad network are not going to show up in the Facebook ad library. One tip that I can give you is you can use AdBeat to potentially do this. So if you wanted to drop the political candidates' websites into AdBeat and see if any of the ads for that website or were running on Google, that would be one way to test it right away. I would just say as a blanket answer to that, there are always people trying to get around rules. There are always people trying to bend the rules, break the rules, find sneaky ways around it. Sometimes they do it with a candidate's knowledge. Sometimes it's without a candidate's knowledge, and they're just really believing in the person and the party that they're behind. And so I'm sure that there will be people who come up with clever workarounds. And if you can figure out ways to be monitoring and watching, maybe you're the one who can catch it. Is there a way to, here we go. Supporters of some presidential candidates are surreptitiously and regularly posting comments and sharing anything about these candidates. How these were able to penetrate Facebook and Google despite a ban on and regulated usage that's supposed to be there. So this is the gray area, okay? You can have an official policy that bans certain types of ads, certain types of targeting that, says, here's what's allowed. But if you are posting regularly and sort of surreptitiously is what you're talking about, and these are not ads, then it's made to look like people organically supporting a candidate, which is of course allowed, right? Like if I'm a supporter of a particular candidate and I want to post on my profile that, they're the right answer for this year's election, I can do that. Where it's really tricky is, as I mentioned earlier, is where, influencers, people with, not necessarily huge followings, but people who are influential in a specific segment that, a party or a candidate wants to target, they may be paid under the table and told to just post about this candidate, but not say that you've been paid to do it. And I remember that Jonathan Corpusong's research in your midterms a couple of years ago found that that was happening with micro influencers. So people with maybe just a few thousand, followers on Instagram or what have you, but who had a devoted following, they were posting pro-political stuff, and they were not labeling them as sponsored posts. And so again, I would just encourage you to kind of keep your eyes open and ask yourself, is this a true organic post, or is this perhaps a post where someone has taken money and they've put it up there instead of as an ad, as a regular post, because they know that that's not going to be regulated, and they know that it's going to seem more authentic. So that's something you should definitely be watching for. When rules come in, people try to break them, and that's a story right there. How are people getting around the rules? All right, last question here from Cherry. Is there a way to monitor ads on other social media platforms, for example, TikTok? Unfortunately, as of right now, there is no kind of universal TikTok library. So really what you have to do is, and maybe you already do this, is you'd have to be on TikTok a fair amount. One thing that you might consider is, if you can, is like set up another TikTok account. Maybe if you have like an old phone that could still run TikTok, or you can borrow a phone from someone, or what have you, or buy a really, really cheap one that can run TikTok. Set up a new TikTok account. Make sure that you are engaging very heavily with anything political. Do searches around candidates, do searches around political topics. Get the TikTok algorithm viewing you as a big consumer of political content, and start to see what it feeds you, and then pay attention to the ads that are there. Again, that takes a bit of manual work every day, opening TikTok and looking and seeing the content that you're seeing. Maybe you spot some people posting stuff that should be labeled sponsored that isn't. And maybe you start to get ads, and you can screenshot them or record them. So unfortunately, yeah, not a super easy way to do it. Twitter does not accept political ads. So again, if people evade that ban, that's a story, but there's no ad library for Twitter. TikTok does not have an ad library. I believe Snapchat does, but I don't know how popular it is in the Philippines, or whether it'd be worth trying to see if they have it for the Philippines, because they may not. But my suggestion for TikTok is to, again, set up an account or take your account and really start engaging with political content and see the ads and the content that you're getting fed, and start to really pay attention to that closely, because that is a way to spot some stuff that might be newsworthy. All right, thank you for the questions. I'm so happy that you asked them, and hopefully that was helpful. I am not obviously an expert on the regulation that has come in, and so the nitty-gritty of what's allowed and what isn't, not my expertise. But people evading bans and evading rules, 100% that is going to try to happen. And as you all know, PR firms are really quite creative and a little bit nefarious at times in the Philippines. And so they're going to sign on to help candidates, and some interesting stuff is going to happen. A link to the slides again. Absolutely. Let me drop that for you right now. And I'll just give a last call right now. Any final questions? I really appreciate you all taking part in this. I really hope that it's been helpful to you. I hope that, as I've said so many times, please go back and go through these slides, use them as a resource, go back through them. Celine is asking about advertising on YouTube. So that's a very good question, and probably another platform that you should be looking at closely for this election. So again, tracking advertising on YouTube, there's no super great universal resource for that. You should be spending time on YouTube, consume political content, look at the ads that you're getting, pay attention to the big channels and who they are supporting and endorsing, and who they might be talking about. So again, sometimes you get easy tools like the Facebook ad library, and other times it's honestly just the manual work of watching and monitoring and trying to get the algorithm feeding you stuff that you're trying to see as part of your reporting. So keep that in mind. And also, I would just say, pay attention to the rules, because if Google is not accepting political ads, then it's a question of, is YouTube? And I don't know, because obviously YouTube is owned by Google. So that's one thing that you may want to look into. I don't know the rule in the Philippines for that, but I would imagine that YouTube is going to be pretty important during this election, and it's definitely a platform worth spending some time getting to know, watching videos, and getting some ads targeted at you to see what kind of stuff you're seeing. Well, I'm glad to see that Richie and others in navigating well-known were able to see that you can get a name by clicking on that Taboola ID. And I hope, like, in the end, you just sort of see, like, there's lots of different approaches and different ways to get at useful information. And a lot of it is oriented at, okay, who is behind this and what is their strategy and how are they making money and how are they making use of the digital environment? Those are all important questions. And depending on the story, some tools and some approaches are going to be more important than others. Maybe it's a website and they're very clear about who owns it, but you want to understand more about how they're earning money and who they work with. You want to understand more about how they get the audience to their website. So depending on what it is that you determine is most newsworthy and important, then you have to think about applying the tools and the strategies that we've gone through today to do that in the best possible way. Yeah. So look, let me just say one more time that the best thing you can do now that we've gone through everything is that set time for yourself in the next week. Put it on your calendar right now, 30 minutes. Make sure you bookmark both slide decks and just slowly flip through every slide and refresh it and practice it as soon as you can. Okay. And so that will be the best way for you to retain this information. And Julie, I know you struggled a bit with your internet connectivity. If you go through the slides on your own, it's going to help you. And let me also, everybody, I'm going to put my email in here. Okay. If you have questions, if there was something that you weren't clear on, you can reach out to me, okay? I'm happy to help. I really want you guys to do great work for this election. It's very important, and I want you to feel like you have access to the information you need to do your best work. This is also my Twitter handle. My DMs are open. If you prefer to contact me there, you can do that. It's a real pleasure to be able to do workshops like this. I really hope that it's useful in the work you do. I'm grateful to the university for bringing me in to do this. It's just been great to be able to interact with all of you, and I appreciate folks who've been chiming in with questions and doing the exercises. It's been a real pleasure, so thank you very much.